I stood up for an old veteran and lost my inheritance. Got kicked out of my home. What happened next will shock you. I always knew my parents had favorites, but I never thought they'd make it this obvious. My sister, Emily, was their golden child, 2 years older than me. She was already in a prestigious business school, living the life my parents had planned for her since birth. Me, I had dreams too, but apparently those didn't matter as much. When I told them I wanted to go to college, they gave me a tight-lipped smile and said, "Well, if you want it, you'll have to pay for it yourself." All our savings are going toward Emily's education. I wasn't surprised, just disappointed. The real kicker? My dad wasn't exactly broke. He had inherited a small auto repair shop and a little piece of land from my grandfather. It wasn't much, but it had history. My grandfather built that place with his own 2 hands. It was more than a shop. It was his pride. There was even a tiny store attached to it where regulars would gather, sip their coffee, and talk about everything from football to local gossip. Grandpa used to say he had a vision to expand, add a bigger service center, maybe even a small motel and cafe, because the location was prime right off a busy highway. But dreams die with dreamers, and when he passed, my dad took over. Unlike Grandpa, my dad didn't have visions, only dollar signs in his eyes. He barely maintained the shop, never invested in it, just let it run enough to pull in some extra cash. I, on the other hand, had spent years helping out there, learning the trade from Grandpa. Even after he was gone, I did what I could to keep the place running. I handled customers, assisted the one full-time mechanic we had, and even restocked a little store. It was the only real work I'd ever known, and in some ways, I felt like it was my inheritance. Turns out, I was wrong. One night at dinner, my dad dropped the bombshell between bites of his steak. "I've decided to sell the shop." I blinked, not sure I heard him right. "What?" "Yeah," he said casually, like he was announcing the weather. "The market's good, and we need the money. Emily's tuition is expensive, and she'll need a place to live after graduation." I stared at him, my appetite gone. "You're selling Grandpa's shop? The land? Everything?" He shrugged. "It's just an old garage. Some guys want to turn it into a nightclub. Good money in that." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. That shop wasn't just some rundown business. It was the last piece of my grandfather. He had plans for it, and so did I. I thought maybe one day, when I could afford it, I'd invest in it, expand, bring Grandpa's vision to life. Now, there was going to be another loud, neon-lit hole for drunks and weekend partygoers. And worst of all, I wasn't getting a dime. I wasn't naive. I knew my parents wouldn't just hand me money. But after everything I had put into that shop, all the years I spent there while Emily was off being the golden child, I thought, I don't know, that maybe I'd have some say in this. "That shop means something to me," I said, try and keep my voice steady. "I've been working there for years." I thought, maybe. "You thought wrong. My dad cut in. This is what's best for the family. Emily's education comes first." Right, because everything always came back to Emily. I glanced at my mom, hoping for some kind of support, but she just gave me that look, the one that said, "Don't argue with your father." I clenched my fists under the table. This wasn't fair. I wasn't asking for luxury. I just wanted a chance. But in their eyes, I was second place, the kid who had to fend for himself. The steak on my plate felt like rubber. My dad was shoveling food into his mouth. My mom was nodding along like this was just another normal conversation. And Emily, well, she was scrolling through her phone like none of this concerned her. Because of course it didn't. She had her future secured. A fancy degree, a new apartment waiting for her. Meanwhile, I was supposed to figure out on my own. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't just let this happen. There had to be something I could do. Memories of Grandpa flooded back. How he'd sit in the shop, wiping his hands on an old rag, telling me stories about how he started with nothing, how he built this place from the ground up. I could still hear his voice. "This isn't just a shop, kid. It's our name, our legacy. People come here because they trust us. You take care of them, and they take care of you. And now, my dad was going to toss it away like an old piece of junk. I couldn't let it happen. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to let some guys in leather jackets turn Grandpa's dream into a nightclub. It was another slow afternoon at the shop. I was in the little store, rearranging some old cans of motor oil and checking the fridge to make sure the sodas weren't expired. Basic stuff. I wasn't even paying attention when I heard the uneven rattle of an engine struggling to stay alive. I turned my head just in time to see an old, battered pickup rolling into the lot, coughing like it had a pack-a-day habit. Something caught my eye, a faded military decal on the rear bumper, barely holding on. When the driver stepped out, I noticed the worn-out jacket he was wearing. Military issue. That, and the way he carried himself, told me everything I needed to know. He was a veteran. The thing looked like it had been held together with duct tape and sheer determination. The door creaked open, and out stepped an older man. He moved slow, like every step was measured. Something about him, his posture, the way he scanned the shop with quiet respect, reminded me of Grandpa. He had those same kind eyes, the ones that made you feel like you were talking to someone who'd seen it all, but still believed in the good in people. He walked into the store and gave me a nod. Up close, I could see the years on his face, the deep lines that told stories of things most people wouldn't understand. Something about him felt familiar, like talking to an old friend you hadn't seen in years. "Son, you got anyone here who could take a look at my truck?" I glanced at his jacket again, then asked, "You a veteran?" He gave a small nod, like he wasn't the type to brag. "Yeah, long time ago. She's running rough, and I got a long way to go." I glanced toward the garage. The one full-time mechanic we had just left for lunch. Just me, but I knew my way around an engine. "Yeah, I got you. Let's take a look." We walked back outside, and I popped the hood. Took me all of 2 minutes to find the issue, a loose wire messing with the ignition. A quick fix. As I worked, the old man stood by, watching, but he didn't hover like some folks do. He just waited, hands in his pockets, patient. "All right, you should be good now," I said, closing the hood with a solid thunk. Nothing serious, just a bad connection. He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it. "Appreciate it, son. Let me get you something for your trouble." "Don't worry about it." Took 5 minutes. We walked back into the store because he wanted to grab a bottle of water before hitting the road. I watched as he pulled out a handful of crumpled bills and loose change, his fingers shaking slightly as he counted. It was clear he was being careful, making sure he had enough. That's when I heard the heavy footfalls behind me. My father. He walked in, eyes going straight to the cash register, like always. He didn't care about the shop, the customers, or the work that went into keeping the place running. Just the money. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing the old man. Just helping him out. His truck had a bad wire. I said, keeping my voice even. "And he paid you?" My father's tone was sharp, like he already knew the answer. I didn't even get the chance to reply before he scoffed. "This isn't charity, boy. We don't do freebies. If he can't afford repair, he can take his junk somewhere else." The air in the room turned thick. The old man stiffened slightly, but kept his dignity. He wasn't looking for handouts. "I'm no charity case," he said, voice calm but firm. "I'll pay what's fair." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the way my father looked at him, like he was less than. Maybe it was the way he was always so quick to count every dollar, but never counted the effort I put into keeping this place running. "There's no charge," I said, locking eyes with my father. It was a 5-minute fix. "You'd rather nickel and dime a veteran?" The old man's gaze flickered, barely noticeable, but I caught it. My father, though, didn't care. "I don't care if he fought in 5 wars. This is a business. You don't own this place." "I do. And if you think you can just give away my money, then maybe you don't need to be here at all." My jaw tightened. "I put in more hours here than you ever did. I kept this place running while you were busy counting your cash. You don't care about the shop. You're selling it to build a nightclub, remember? Grandpa built this place. He had a dream. You're throwing it away." That did it. My father's face turned red. "Get out." The words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. You're done here. And don't bother coming home, either. You want to act like a big man? Go figure out on your own. I let out a slow breath, nodding. All right, then give me the money I earned. All the time I put in here. He reached into his pocket, pulled out something, and threw it at me. A single lottery ticket. $5. That's what you get. That's all you deserve. It hit the floor, skidding under a shelf. My hands curled into fists, but I didn't move. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I turned and walked out. The old man followed, slow but steady. He bent down, picked up a lottery ticket, and held it out. Here, might be your lucky day. I shook my head. Keep it. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry for... I gestured back toward the shop. All of it. He studied me for a moment, then smiled just a little. You got a good heart, son. Your father might not see it, but I do. And things have a way of working out for people like you. He gave me a last nod, then slipped the ticket into his pocket instead. I'll hold on to it then. Maybe it's my lucky day. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel, my whole body tense. I didn't know what was next. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going back. And neither was he. I drove home in a daze, my head spinning. The last few hours had flipped my world upside down, but I couldn't afford to sit around feeling sorry for myself. If my dad wanted me out, fine. I wasn't about to beg. I pulled into the driveway, went inside, and grabbed what little I had, some clothes, my old laptop, a few keepsakes from Grandpa that I wasn't about to leave behind. My mom sat at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee like it held the answers to all of life's problems. She didn't say a word. Not when I packed, not when I walked out the door. Guess she'd made her choice too. I got into my car and left. Just like that. The apartment I found wasn't much. A tiny, run-down studio in the worst part of town, with peeling paint and neighbors who either blasted music at 2 a.m. or screamed at each other through the walls. But it was cheap, and right now, cheap was all I could afford. The plumbing made weird noises. The heater only worked when it felt like it, and I was pretty sure the guy downstairs was running some kind of shady operation, but I didn't have the luxury of being picky. I needed to stretch my money as far as possible, and that meant learning to live with the roaches. Finding a job wasn't easy, but I had experience at a shop, and that counted for something. After a week of searching, I landed a gig at a small, independently owned repair shop on the edge of town. The pay wasn't great, barely enough to scrape by, but it was work, and right now, that was all I needed. The owner, Mike, was the kind of guy who smiled when customers were around, but turned into a completely different person behind closed doors. He was greedy, always looking for ways to squeeze more money out of people. He'd mark up prices, insist on unnecessary repairs, and play dumb when customers caught on. I hated it, but I needed the job, so I kept my mouth shut and did what I had to do. A few months passed. My life had settled into a dull routine. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I wasn't saving anything, just barely keeping my head above water. It wasn't the life I wanted, but at least I was getting by. Then, one afternoon, a young woman pulled into the shop. She was driving a beat-up sedan, the kind that had been through years of hard use, but was still holding on. Her little boy sat in the back, kicking his feet against the seat, completely oblivious to the stress written all over his mother's face. She explained the issue. Something was making a weird noise under the hood. I took a quick look and found the problem almost immediately. A loose belt, nothing serious. A 5-minute fix, just like the old veteran's truck. Mike, of course, saw dollar signs. He walked over, nodded like he was some kind of expert, and rattled off a list of necessary repairs. You're looking at about $600, he said, completely straight-faced. The woman's face fell. 600? I don't have that kind of money. Are you sure it's that bad? I gritted my teeth. This was robbery, plain and simple. I spoke up. It's just a loose belt. Nothing major. Maybe $20 max. Mike's head snapped toward me, eyes burning with fury. You don't run this shop. Kid, I do. And if I say it's 600, then it's 600. You got a problem with that? I did. A big one. I reached into my pocket, pulled out what little cash I had left, and threw it on the counter. Here, this should cover it. The woman looked at me like I had just handed her the moon. You don't have to do that. Yeah, well, I said with a half smile, seems like people keep throwing me out for doing the right thing. Might as well keep the streak going. Mike's face turned red. Get out. You're done here. I grabbed my jacket, nodded to the woman, and walked out. By the time I got back to my apartment, reality hit me. I was jobless. Again, I sat on my worn-out couch, staring at the peeling ceiling, wondering why life seemed to punish the people who actually cared. It wasn't fair. Guys like my dad, like Mike, they took what they wanted and never thought twice about the people they hurt. And they never seemed to lose. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. He used to say, no matter how hard it gets, remember, nothing stays the same forever. I held on to that thought, because right now it was all I had. The next morning, I got in my car and headed to another job interview. I wasn't excited about it. Just another shop, another boss, another chance to get screwed over. But as I drove past my grandfather's old repair shop, I felt something sink inside me. It was closed. The gates were locked. The place looked lifeless. Sold. I parked across the street, staring at the building where I'd spent so much of my childhood. The shop where I'd learned everything. The shop where Grandpa had dreamed of building something bigger. And now it was just gone. I sat there for a long time, unable to move, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I was still sitting in my car, staring at the lifeless shell of my grandfather's shop, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it. Probably some telemarketer trying to sell me an extended car warranty or a fake IRS scam. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up, "Kid, it's me?" It took me a second to place the voice. Then it hit me. The old veteran. I sat up straighter. "How'd you get my number?" He chuckled. "That's a long story. Let's just say I have my ways. Look, I need to talk to you. I'm not far from where we met that first time. You know that little cafe near the shop?" I did. Everyone around here knew that place. It had been around forever. The kind of spot where old-timers nursed coffee for hours and debated sports like it was life or death. "Yeah, I know it." "Good. Meet me there in 30 minutes. He hung up before I could ask why. I hesitated. The last few days had been a mess, and I wasn't sure I was in the mood for another curveball. But curiosity won. I started the engine and headed toward the cafe. The bell above the door jingled when I walked in, and the place looked exactly how I remembered. Dim lighting, old booths with cracked leather seats, a counter lined with coffee cups that had seen better days. A couple of guys sat in the corner arguing about football, and a waitress in a faded uniform was refilling someone's coffee. Behind the counter was Dave, the bartender. He'd been running the place for as long as I could remember. His face lit up when he saw me. "Well, look who decided to show up. Thought you'd skip town." I slid onto a stool at the counter. "Not yet. Give me a coffee, Black." He poured it without asking for payment. "On the house, kid. Shame about the shop. I used to take my truck there. You always did good work. Better than those crooks in the city. Now I gotta drive 20 minutes just to get my brakes checked, and they charge an arm and a leg before they even pop the hood." I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness wake me up. "Yeah, well, looks like everything around here is getting torn down." Dave sighed. "Tell me about it. This place is next. Land developer made an offer. I can't turn it down, even if I wanted to. Not many people stopping by anymore. Soon, this whole area is going to look like every other cookie-cutter shopping center. No shop, no cafe. Just more chain stores and overpriced apartments." I shook my head. "Doesn't anyone care?" "Oh, people care. They just don't have money. And where there's big money, nothing else matters." We talked for a few minutes, the weight of reality settling in. First the shop, now this. Soon, the neighborhood I grew up in wouldn't even be recognizable. Then, a sound outside caught my attention. A truck pulling into the lot. Not just any truck. A brand new Ford F-150, fresh from the dealership, still gleaming under the sunlight. It looked like something a CEO would drive, the kind of vehicle that cost more than I'd made in the past year. I whistled low. Looks like you got a rich guy stopping by. I muttered. Dave glanced toward the window. Yeah, guess I better raise the prices before he walks in. We both laughed, but the moment the driver stepped out, my stomach dropped. It was the old veteran. He shut the door of his truck and adjusted his jacket before heading toward the entrance. As he stepped inside, he gave me a nod. Not sure if I ever told you my name back then. Name's Frank. And he looked nothing like the man I'd met before. My jaw nearly hit the counter. No way. I barely registered Dave saying something as I turned in my seat, watching the old man settle into the cafe like he'd been coming here for years. This was not the same guy who had been counting change for a bottle of water, and I had a feeling I was about to find out why. Frank looked like a completely different man. Clean-shaven, wearing a simple but well-made button-down shirt and a pair of jeans that didn't look like they had seen decades of hard labor. There was nothing flashy about him. No gold watch, no expensive accessories, just an air of quiet confidence that made him seem like someone who had nothing to prove. But I wasn't buying it. Not yet. Still in shock. I followed him to a booth, my brain working overtime trying to process what I was seeing. Frank waved over the waitress and ordered 2 coffees, like this was just another normal day. Meanwhile, I was still struggling to connect this version of him with the man I'd met at the shop, the man counting change for a bottle of water. Before I could say anything, Dave, the bartender, leaned over the counter and smirked. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. This guy was in here last week looking for you. Said he was trying to find a young mechanic from the old service shop. I gave him your number. I blinked. Wait, what? Dave chuckled. Yeah, and he left me $100 in tips just for helping him out. Frank shot him a grin. You earned it, kid. I turned back to Frank, still suspicious. All right, so you found me. Now, tell me, where did you get the money? Frank took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes twinkling like he was enjoying every second of dragging this out. Patience, kid. I'm getting there. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I'm listening. Frank set his cup down and folded his hands on the table. All right. So you remember the day we met? After you walked away, I went home. I live in a little apartment in a quiet town, nothing fancy. Thanks to you, I got home without breaking down on the side of the road. But I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair your father had been to you. I saw what kind of man you were. People like you don't go unnoticed forever. I knew that someday, one way or another, you'd get what was coming to you. Something good. Because no matter how bad things get, nothing stays the same forever. The moment he said it, my heart nearly stopped. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw my grandfather sitting across from me instead of Frank. The same words. The same calm certainty. It was like I was 12 years old again, sitting in the shop, listening to Grandpa talk about life. Frank noticed a look on my face. Something wrong? I shook my head, trying to get my voice to work. That was my grandfather's favorite saying. He said it all the time. Frank's smile was small, knowing. He didn't say anything else about it, just nodded like he understood. Then he kept talking. Anyway, about a week later, I was sitting at this little diner with some of my old buddies, and I meet up a few times a week. We swap stories, complain about our aching backs. You know how it is. And up on the TV, they were broadcasting the lottery drawing. That's when I remembered the ticket. I stared at him. No. Frank laughed. Oh, yeah. I pulled it out, checked the numbers. And I swear, for a second, I thought my heart was going to give out right there in the booth. My friends thought I was having a stroke. Turns out that ticket you gave me, it was worth more than $10 million. I couldn't breathe. Frank continued like he was just talking about the weather. Took a few days to get everything processed, but the money's real, sitting in my account. And let me tell you, being a millionaire in a small town gets old real fast. Everybody suddenly has a business idea, a favor to ask, or a great investment opportunity. So I sold my little apartment, packed up, and bought myself a small place out by a lake where nobody knows I'm a millionaire grandpa. He took another sip of coffee and leaned back in his seat. And, of course, I didn't forget about you. That's why I'm here. I couldn't say a word. My mind was still reeling. Frank had won the lottery with the ticket I had refused to take. And now he was sitting across from me, about to tell me why he had come looking for me. Frank let out a slow breath, giving me a moment to process everything. Honestly, I needed more than a moment. I glanced over at Dave, who was just as stunned as I was. The guy had seen all kinds of weird stuff in this cafe over the years, but this was something else entirely. He shook his head, still gripping the coffee pot like he might need it to steady himself. Wait, so let me get this straight. You gave away a winning lottery ticket? Like a $10 million ticket? I nodded, still not trusting myself to speak. Dave let out a low whistle. Man, I've heard some crazy stories in this place, but that's next level. Frank chuckled, clearly enjoying the moment. Then he turned back to me, his expression softening. I came here to say goodbye, kid. Also, to give you my address in case you ever want to drop by. Got a nice little place by the lake now. You ever feel like fishing or just getting away from the noise? You're always welcome. I barely had time to nod before he continued. But that's not the real reason I'm here. The real reason is I want you to have your grandfather's shop back. For a second, I thought I misheard him. What? Frank smiled. I bought it. The whole thing. The shop, the land, everything around it. And it's yours now. I shot up from my seat, so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. You what? Frank just kept smiling, like he was handing me a spare tire, not an entire business. It's yours, kid. Do whatever you want with it. Fix it up, expand, make it the place your grandfather always dreamed of. No strings attached. I felt like I had been hit by a freight train. Frank, I can't accept this. That's too much. He shook his head. It's not too much. It's exactly what should happen. That place was always meant to be yours. Your grandfather wanted you to have it, and I saw the way you fought for it, even when your own father turned his back on you. That shop belongs to someone who actually cares about it. I sat back down, running a hand through my hair. My mind was spinning so fast I could barely keep up. I had spent the last few months trying to survive, trying to figure out where my life was going, and now, just like that, everything had changed. You serious? It's really mine. Frank grinned. Kid, I've got more money than I know what to do with. And believe me, I don't need a repair shop. But you do. So, yeah, it's yours. And we've got a lawyer waiting in town with all the paperwork to make it official. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to say thank you in a way that felt big enough for what he was giving me. So, I did the only thing that felt right. I stood up and hugged him. Hard. The kind of hug I hadn't given anyone since I was a kid, since my grandfather was still around. Frank patted my back, laughing. All right. Don't go getting all sentimental on me. We've still got to get downtown and sign the papers. I let go, still feeling like I was floating. Frank, I don't know how to repay you for this. He smiled, shaking his head. You don't need to. You already did. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like he was letting me in on a secret. You treated me with respect when you had no reason to. You stood up for me when you didn't have to, and when you had nothing, you still gave. People like you don't come around often. I wasn't about to let the world steamroll over you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You didn't have to do all this. Frank just smiled. Yeah, but I wanted to. And besides, this isn't everything. There's still one more thing I've got for you. I let out a nervous laugh. Frank, if you keep this up, I'm going to drop dead from shock before we even get to the lawyer's office. He laughed, standing up and throwing some cash onto the table. Come on, kid. Let's go change your life. I followed him out the door, still half expecting to wake up, and realized this was all some wild dream. But it wasn't. We stepped out of the cafe, and I still felt like I was walking through some kind of dream. I turned to Dave, who was still frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. Hey, man, I called out. Keep an eye on my car for me, all right? Dave blinked a few times before finally nodding. Yeah, sure, dude. But when you get back, you owe me a drink. I need something strong after this. I laughed, still trying to shake off the surreal feeling. Frank gestured toward his truck, and I climbed into passenger seat, barely registering how smooth and quiet the engine was as we pulled away. Frank drove like a man who had nowhere to be in a hurry. The city streets blurred past us as we made our way downtown, eventually stopping in front of a small brick building with gold lettering on the glass. Henderson and Clark, attorneys at law. Frank put the truck in park and turned to me. All right, kid, let's go make this official. Inside, everything was already set up. A well-dressed lawyer was waiting with a stack of documents on his desk. Frank barely sat down before the guy slid a thick folder in front of me and handed me a pen. Just sign here, the lawyer said, tapping a few places on the paper. I hesitated for half a second before pressing the pen to the page. A few swipes of ink. And just like that, I was no longer a guy couch-hopping between dead-end jobs. I was the owner of my grandfather's old repair shop and all the land around it. The place that had been stolen from me was now mine. Frank leaned back in his chair, grinning. How's it feel? I exhaled, shaking my head, like I'm in someone else's life. The lawyer gathered the documents, gave me a firm handshake, and that was it. Done. No catch. No loopholes. I owned it, but Frank wasn't finished yet. We walked back out to his truck, and as soon as I buckled in, he started driving again. All right, one more stop. I frowned. Frank, what else could you possibly have up your sleeve? He chuckled but didn't answer, just kept driving through town like a man on a mission. We weaved through traffic until we pulled up in front of a First National Bank. Now I was really confused. Frank shut off the engine. You got a bank account? I nodded slowly. Yeah, but what does that have to do with anything? He smirked. Well, let's go make a deposit. Inside, the place was quiet, all polished floors and fake smiles from the tellers. We made our way to a desk where a manager, a guy in a suit who looked like he hadn't been surprised by anything in years, greeted us. What can I do for you gentlemen today? He asked in that overly professional tone bankers always use. Frank sat down, completely at ease. I want to transfer some money into my friend's account. The banker smiled politely. Of course. How much would you like to transfer? Frank glanced at me, then back at the manager. 5 million. The room went silent. I felt my stomach drop through the floor. Frank. No. The banker, to his credit, barely blinked. 5 million? Frank nodded like he was discussing the weather. Yep. I shook my head, trying to find my voice. Frank, this is insane. You've already done too much. Buying the shop, giving me the land, that was more than enough. I can't take this. Frank just gave me that same calm look. And how exactly do you plan on making your grandfather's dream a reality? You want to expand, build that cafe and motel like you told me, right? That takes money. And I got more than I'll ever need. I opened my mouth to argue, but Frank raised a hand. Look, kid, I'm old. I've got plenty left to live on. No way I'll even touch half of what I've got before I kick the bucket. So what am I going to do? Let it sit there? You think I want to spend my golden years dodging long-lost cousins who suddenly remember my name? No thanks. I'd rather put this money somewhere it belongs. And you? You belong in that shop. You belong running it the way it was meant to be run. The banker, who had been silently watching all of this unfold, finally spoke up. I have worked in this bank for 15 years, and I have never seen anyone turn down $5 million. I swallowed hard. Frank, He grinned. Kid, you're going to take this money. You're going to build something incredible, and someday, when someone walks into your shop, down on their luck, and needing a second chance, you're going to pay it forward. That's how this works. I sat there, staring at him, at the banker, at the transfer form in front of me, and then, slowly, I picked up the pen and signed my name. The banker typed a few things into his computer, and a few minutes later, he looked up at me with a small nod. Congratulations. You're a millionaire. The words barely felt real. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a nobody. I was a millionaire, and I had a business to run. When we pulled back up to the cafe, the place was buzzing with life. The parking lot was packed, and through the windows, I could see people gathered around, laughing, raising glasses, celebrating like it was a national holiday. The moment I stepped inside, the whole room erupted in cheers. People clapped me on the back, shook my hand, and congratulated me like I just won the Super Bowl. I barely had time to process it, but it didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. Dave had told everyone. I shot him a look across the bar, and he just shrugged. What? You expect me to keep something like this to myself? I couldn't even be mad. A few of the old shop regulars came up to me, big grins on their faces. So it's true? The shop's staying. I nodded. Yeah, it's mine now, and I'm bringing it back the way it was meant to be. That was all they needed to hear. Another round of cheers, more claps on the back, more drinks raised in my honor. Frank and I found a table near the back, away from the commotion. He nursed his coffee while I tried to wrap my head around everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. You all right, kid? He asked, watching me with that knowing look of his. I exhaled a laugh. I don't even know. Yesterday I had nothing. Now I have everything. Frank nodded. Life's funny like that. But remember, this isn't just about money. It's about what you do with it. I nodded, letting that sink in. After a while, he pushed back his chair. All right, I better get going. We walked outside together, the night air cool against my face. He turned to me before getting into his truck. It's all in your hands now. Just don't forget who you are. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I won't. He pulled me into a hug, firm and steady, the kind that said more than words ever could. And don't forget to visit, he added as he climbed into his truck. That lake's not going to fish itself. I nodded, watching as he pulled away, the taillights disappearing into the night. For a long moment, I just stood there. Then I got into my own car. The engine rumbled beneath me, steady and strong. I gripped the wheel, staring out the road ahead, still half expecting to wake up and find out this was all a dream. Yesterday I had no job, no money, no future. Today I was a millionaire, a business owner, a man with a second chance. They say the universe has a way of paying back the good you put into the world. And sometimes when you least expect it, it gives it back 100 times over. I guess this was my turn. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling, like my brain was trying to convince me that everything from the last 24 hours had been some wild fever dream. For a second, panic hit. But then my eyes landed on the thick folder sitting on my desk, the one with my name on the deed to the shop. My phone screen still lit up with the same unbelievable bank notification from yesterday. $5 million deposited. It was real. I sat up, rubbed my face, and let the realization sink in. Everything had changed overnight. A day ago, I was struggling to get by, and now I was a millionaire. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and silently thanked the universe for whatever cosmic chain of events had led me here. That was when it hit me. This wasn't random luck. This was the result of a choice I had made. If I hadn't stood up for Frank that day, if I hadn't trusted my gut, none of this would have happened. It made me wonder how many people miss out on their own moments just because they choose the easy way, the selfish way. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat back, and let it all sink in. But there wasn't much time to relax. I had work to do. First thing on my list, the shop. I wasn't just going to fix it up. I was going to turn it into something bigger, something worthy of my grandfather's dream. That meant more than just a repair shop. It meant a full-service complex with modern auto shop, a small motel, and a retro-style cafe. Exactly what Grandpa had always envisioned. I hired the best construction crew I could find and got to work. Money made things move fast. Every day, I was at the site, overseeing everything, making sure every detail was right. When I needed advice, I called Frank. Even from his quiet lakeside retreat, he was still guiding me, helping me with planning, layout, and business strategy. We video called almost every day, sketching ideas, tweaking designs. Meanwhile, I moved into a better place, a big, comfortable apartment with actual space to breathe. I bought a Ford F-150, not because I wanted to show off, but because I needed something practical for hauling supplies to the site. My days were packed, my hands always full. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I was building something. 1 year later, I stood in front of the completed complex. It was exactly as I had imagined, modern, functional, but with that classic small-town charm that made it feel like home. The auto shop was state-of-the-art. The motel was cozy and welcoming, and the cafe, it looked like something straight out of the 1950s, with checkered floors, leather booths, and a jukebox in the corner. The grand opening was bigger than I ever expected. People from all over the area showed up, old customers, new faces, even a few folks who just wanted to see what all the hype was about. And, of course, Frank was there. He stood next to me as we cut the ceremonial ribbon, grinning like he was watching his own grandson succeed. Inside, the party was in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. I had brought in an old friend to run the cafe, Dave, the bartender. The guy deserved a place where he could actually enjoy his job, and he fit in perfectly behind the counter, joking with customers like he'd been doing it his whole life. Everything was perfect until I saw him walk in. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But no, there he was. My father. He looked around in complete disbelief, like he couldn't process what he was seeing. He had heard rumors, of course. Everyone had been talking about how some millionaire had rebuilt the shop. But he never once thought that millionaire could be me. He waited until most of the crowd had died down before finally approaching. I have to admit, I didn't expect this. I crossed my arms, staying quiet. He nodded, looking around. I'm proud of you, son. You saved the family business, kept your grandfather's legacy alive. The words sounded good, but they felt empty. I didn't miss a beat. It's not ours. It's mine. And you lost the right to call me your son the day you threw me out. He flinched, but he recovered quickly. I was trying to do what was best for the family. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, I bet. And now that you're struggling, now that Emily's expensive degree isn't paying off, suddenly you remember I exist? Let me guess, you need money? He shifted uncomfortably. I won't lie, things have been tough. We put everything into Emily's future, and she's still trying to find a stable job. I thought, maybe we could rebuild our relationship. Maybe you could use a business partner. I stared at him, waiting for some sign that this was anything more than self-interest. But there was nothing, just greed, just desperation. No, his face darkened. You're seriously going to turn your back on your own father? I didn't even blink. You turned your back on me first. Family doesn't throw each other away when things get tough. You made your choice. Now live with it. His expression twisted with anger, but I didn't care. You think just because you have money now you get to act like this? Money doesn't make you better than us. I leaned in slightly. No, but integrity does. And that's something you never had. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could get another word out, 2 security guys stepped up. Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave. He glared at me one last time, but he knew he had lost. With a huff, he turned and stormed out. I exhaled, letting the last bit of tension drain from my body. Frank clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did good, kid. I nodded, looking around at everything I had built. The laughter, the music, the sense of community that filled the space. This was my life now. And for the first time ever, it was exactly where I wanted to be. Business was thriving. The shop, the motel, the cafe, it all ran like a well-oiled machine. I had hired a solid team to manage everything, and they did their jobs well. I still stopped by often, checking in, making sure everything stayed true to my grandfather's vision. But the truth was, I didn't need to be there every day. I had built something that could stand on its own. One afternoon, I walked into the cafe and found Dave, no longer just a bartender, but now the full-time manager, going over the books. He looked up and gave me a nod. Hey, man, got a minute? I sat down at the counter, and he poured me a coffee before leaning in. Your dad's been stopping by. That got my attention. Dave went on, explaining how my father had been coming in every so often, keeping to himself, ordering a coffee, and just sitting there, lost in thought. Last time he was here, I overheard him talking to someone. Said he knows he screwed everything up. Said they're selling the house, moving to another state. His words, not mine. He left this. Dave slid an envelope across the counter. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside was an address. No letter, no explanation, just a place. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling something I wasn't sure how to name. Pity? Frustration? Maybe both. My parents had built their whole lives around my sister's success, and she had walked away from them the second she had her own life. Now, they were left with nothing but regrets. It wasn't my problem, but it still sat heavy in my chest. Life kept moving. Somewhere along the way, I met someone. Her name was Emily. Not my sister, obviously, but a different Emily, one with a sharp sense of humor, and the kind of smile that made everything feel lighter. We hit off fast, and before I knew it, we were building a life together. A year later, I proposed. She said yes without hesitation. I spent a lot of time with Frank, too. We'd sit by the lake, fishing, talking about life. He was the one who told me I should reach out to my parents. Not for them, but for me, holding on to that weight. He said one night, staring out the water, "It doesn't hurt them, it hurts you." I promised I'd think about it. And I did. A lot. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Months passed. Wedding plans were in full swing, and Emily and I decided to deliver some invitations in person. Frank was first on our list. He was overjoyed, wrapping me in a bear hug before promising to be there, front and center. Then came the big one, the address in the envelope. My parents. Emily and I drove out to their new place, which, I had to admit, was nice. A quiet, peaceful home surrounded by trees. It felt like a fresh start, which, I suppose, was exactly what they needed. I hesitated before knocking. When the door opened, my father stood there, looking different. Older, yes, but also lighter, like the anger had drained out of him. For a second, no one spoke. Then he smiled, a real one, not the forced kind I remembered. "I knew you'd come." My mother appeared behind him, her eyes wet. "We've been waiting." I introduced Emily, and we handed them the wedding invitation. My father held it like it was something fragile. "You're inviting us?" "Yeah," I said simply. "If you want to come." We had dinner together. It was awkward at first, but by the end, it felt normal. My father apologized more times than I could count, but I didn't need him to anymore. I had already forgiven him. When we got up to leave, he hugged me, really hugged me. For the first time in my life, it felt like he actually saw me. Before I left, I told him that if they ever needed anything, I'd be there. He smiled and said they'd be fine. They had enough from the sale of the house to live comfortably. And for the first time in a long time, they were just focusing on being happy. As Emily and I drove away, I felt something inside me shift, like a weight had been lifted. "You okay?" she asked. I grinned, rolling down the window and letting the wind rush in. Never better. Life had come full circle. I had lost everything and built it all back, piece by piece. And if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was this. No matter how bad things get, no matter how unfair life seems, nothing stays the same forever. It gets better. But only if you make the choice to be better. And that choice, it's yours every single day.